Are we going too far yet? Is it to come?
Some really fundamental paradigm shifts.
You have to make your tech suitable, useful to the customer.
Hello and welcome to the Talk Auto podcast. I'm Ben.
And I'm Holly, and every month we will be joined by industry experts talking along different topics along the automotive industry. Now, this week we've got an exciting topic coming up, don't we?
We certainly do. Today we're going to be talking about software-defined vehicles, SDVs, and how they're shaping the automotive landscape moving forward.
We've got some fantastic guests this month. Thank you both for being here. I'd like to introduce Karoline Baumann, the Strategy Director at Cox Automotive Europe, and Nic Thomas, Managing Director at Changan UK. Thank you both for being here. How are you?
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Fantastic. I think what would be really nice to start with is just to kind of get an insight into your role in automotive, what you do now, how long you've been in the industry, and kind of why you're here talking about SDVs today. Caroline, should we start with you?
Yeah, so I look after strategy and new growth at Cox Automotive Europe, which includes anything sort of strategic, futuristic, software-defined vehicles are a big part, obviously, of what's changing in the industry. And I've been in the industry pretty much all of my career. I started on the manufacturing side for Volkswagen, Jaguar Land Rover, always in kind of strategy-related roles, and then been with Cox Automotive now for almost 5 years. And yeah, it's a great opportunity, and it's a great industry to be in. You know, there's so much changing. There are so many things happening, and some really fundamental paradigm shifts as well that it's just really exciting to be part of.
Definitely. It's a good time to be in automotive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And Nic, yourself?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting time to be in automotive and at a very changing time. I joined Changan as the first European commercial employee just at the beginning of 2024, so nearly 2 years now. Setting up the European business, and now, as you said, I'm leading the UK business primarily, but also keeping in with that setup of the European business. Similarly, I'm an automotive lifer. I started my career with Ford in the UK, and I've worked in many European countries with Ford, and then with Nissan. And I was leader of the electric vehicle business for Nissan, so I did 4 years in Japan at headquarters as well.
It sucks you in automotive, doesn't it? It's always, you talk to people in automotive, you're like, yeah, we've been in it for life. It's been 20 years.
You can't escape.
You can't escape it. No, well, thank you.
It. Yeah.
Thank you so much both for coming on the podcast. We've again got an exciting topic, SDVs, software-defined vehicles. I think what would be really useful to start with is just to quickly define, because there's almost no definition,
There's certainly not a dictionary definition of it. I think it's one of those terms that has sort of sprung up over the last few years as we've moved to, you know, things like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. That sort of started that innovation and that progression moving forward. And we've now got cars where you've got brake-by-wire systems and nothing's actually connected to any of the mechanical parts. So I just wanted to sort of get your guys' views on how things have progressed over the last few years. You know, what is the benefit of doing a lot of this stuff in-house versus sort of taking things off the shelf, so to speak, if you've got any sort of
I think for me what it means is it's a vehicle which is designed, engineered, built around software, rather than, you know, traditionally they've been built around a chassis and the mechanicals and a platform and a powertrain, and then you add on some software to do some things. It is a vehicle that is built from the software and the battery upwards. And what that means is that you have a central CPU that can control so many of the functions, as you just said, Ben, around the vehicle. And more importantly, you can update them as you go. So the vehicle that you drive out of the showroom, firstly, whenever we have issues with that, cars always have issues. We know that. What matters to the customer is how quickly you fix them and how effectively you fix them. By being able to do it over the air, by being able to do it remotely, you can do it much more quickly, much more effectively, and much more conveniently for the customer. And then you have that potential to add features, to increase, to improve the usability of the vehicle as you go as well. And that's to me what it means.
It's very much evolving, isn't it? It's a vehicle that evolves over time as much as it's, you know, you buy it off the shelf, but then these software updates, it improves, it evolves, it kind of progresses. I think that's really interesting. Caroline?
Totally. As Nic said, you know, normally when you have a vehicle now, in the past, it was all about the hardware, and pretty much the minute the car rolls off the production line, it just gets older from there on out, right? With software, it's almost the opposite way in terms of the minute the car rolls off, it's only going to get better from a software point of view, right? It's going to learn your preferences. It's going to learn potentially it gets updated with new features, you know, new developments. some of the OEMs that we see already, you know, they can update new lights, new infotainment systems, whatever the customer wants. And the car also kind of learns with you in terms of the personalization, what the driver likes, what different moods you have, how you drive the vehicle, and it kind of adapts to the user and the owner ultimately. So it's a completely different way of thinking about vehicles and personalization, which is so different to anything we've seen before.
Absolutely. It's just a complete change in how we drive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that, you know, that consumer behavior, what we can expect from a vehicle, the tech that we expect now. You know, you look at some, you know, TV adverts. I saw one the other day for Volvo XC60, the EV version, and the tech that's expected, the marketing of the vehicles and the tech that's expected within that, helping a girl learn to drive. And it was all this tech, this driver assist, this lane assist, everything. At what point do you guys think that this tech is actually perhaps too much tech? Can there be such things, too much tech in a vehicle? Are we going too far yet? Is it to come? What do you think?
For me, I think, you know, the consumer expectations are very much shaped by not just the automotive industry, but actually how they interact and kind of the digitization they're surrounded by, right? Your mobile phones, how they kind of integrate seamlessly. Yes, there's a lot that kind of coming out, but ultimately we're not turning on everything straight away, right? I think there'll be different phases. A lot of kind of the software elements have focused on infotainment and sort of safety features, things like that. We're now coming into a space where it is all becoming about personalization, predictive maintenance, and if anything, it should make the life easier for consumers, right, and drivers in the way that because the car learns, it takes things out of your hands. It recognizes failures before or issues before you even notice it as a customer. So if anything, it shouldn't be overwhelming. It should almost turn into the opposite, where a lot of things get done in the background for you that you don't even notice as a consumer, but it just feels easier. It feels more personalized and more enjoyable as a result of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think there's no such thing as too much tech. I think there's good tech and bad tech. We're everybody from a 3-year-old, and perhaps they shouldn't be, but up to an 85-year-old. We all live on our phones. We're all dependent on screens. We're used to that. They're integrated into our lives because they enhance them. There's all sorts of other arguments, but let's just say that they enhance them for now. And tech in cars needs to do the same. It needs to seamlessly integrate into your life. It needs to make things easier for you. It needs to make things better for you. Bad tech, and you reference some of the safety features, and that's typically the one that customers complain about most. We know with NCAP 5-star now, you need to have a lot of active safety systems. Those are there to protect you. They do a really, really good job. But some of them are very badly calibrated, and they're beeping and buzzing and bonging at you all the time. And people spend all this time looking at a screen trying to figure out how to turn them off and then get distracted. Yeah. That's a bad tech. So what you have to do is you have to make your tech suitable, useful to the customer, seamlessly integrate with their life, enhance their drive, and you have to give them the choice as well. So customers still want physical buttons. They still want stalks on their screen, on their car. And there we go, screen. They still want to know how to use it. But some customers want the options to completely customize their car, to change the interior light settings, to change the acceleration and the regenerative brake settings, and to go deep into the suspension. And some customers just want to get in and drive and go, yes, I can use Apple CarPlay. And you have to give them that range of options, but you have to do it in a really simple and seamless way for them.
I think that's a really good point, actually, what you mentioned about choice, because when you think about kind of that new generation of car owners, drivers, they come from a different generation, as you say, that's grown up digitally first, and that's how they're going to approach it. But you can't alienate customers that haven't, right? So having that element of choice, but also the choice of how you want to share your data, right? In terms of the more personalized you want it, it also means you have to share data, and there's different attitudes between people and customers, and that's an important part as well in terms of that privacy element of that.
I'm really interested to get your guys' views on, what choices OEMs are making with the software, whether it's taking something out of the box like Android Automotive and supporting things like Apple CarPlay, or sort of carving your own route and building an operating system from the ground up.
I think we're always going to have our own operating system as a base, but what you have to do is build it around the customer. You have to build it in a way that the customer can make their own choices about what they want, and to build it to make it as easy as possible. So everybody wants Android Auto, Apple CarPlay in their cars. That's a given that you have to have that, and expect that I don't know, 80% of people are going to use it. I might believe our system is better, but it doesn't matter. What you have to provide is that customer choice, and you have to build it in a way that it's, as I said earlier, really good tech has to be really usable for the customer. So it has to be really accessible. If they're having to, we've all got big screens in the cars now. I think ours looks really nice on the Changan. It tilts towards you. It's really, but everybody's got a screen. What you don't want is the customer having to scroll through detailed menus while they're driving along, because that is definitely unsafe. So it's got to be, in their view line, and they've got to have very easily accessible the things that they want to do. You've got to have buttons, stalks on and around the steering wheels. People still want to use that. And then you've got to integrate everything else into really usable ways. Voice control is increasingly a popular choice, but lots of people don't like it, and frankly, it doesn't always work. I use Siri. I was driving down the motorway last night, trying to send off various messages and respond to various things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But what matters is that you build these things around the customer. So on our screen, you've got a toolbar that's always on at the bottom of the screen with your most used functions. You've got, as well as indicator stalks and wiper stalks and buttons on the steering wheel for your sound system, etc. You've got customizable buttons. So whatever you think as a customer are the most important features, you can very quickly access those and customize those. And because a customer in Norway is going to want heated seats and heated steering wheel really accessible, a customer in Greece is going to want the cooled seats really accessible. So therefore, the customer can customize their car as much as they want to. But equally, you can just get in, turn it on and drive off, and it works very well. It's that fine tuning that you enable customers to do that is the benefit of software defined vehicles.
Definitely. I think that's a really interesting point in the remarketing sector, because you buy an SDV off the shelf and it customizes to you. It collects all this data on you if you'd like it to, again, having that choice. It's got, as you say, in Changan, these most used vehicles or applications. When it goes to remarketing, if it goes to auction from a second-hand retailer point of view, what are the policies that we have in place? What are the kind of uses that they have to wipe that data? What is, from a privacy standpoint, what does that look like at the moment? And does it need to improve?
Yeah, I mean, you touch on a really important point, because software-defined vehicles, they change a lot of things, but they also really change a lot of things in the remarketing sector that we operate in. So when you look historically, a car that comes into the remarketing, it was very much about remanufacturing, kind of the hardware, reconditioning, things like that, a mechanical inspection. Now it really changes in terms of, you talked about, how do you wipe the data? How do you make it GDPR compliant, right, between new customers? What about cybersecurity? How do you transfer, if there's a vehicle that's turned on certain software features that maybe are based on a subscription model, what does that mean to a new buyer? How do you transfer those? Are there certain software factory resets you have to be done? How do you make sure the car is updated to the latest and calibrated properly? Like, there's a bunch of new skills and tasks that come into the marketing sector that wouldn't have been there a couple of years ago. It's almost like a digital reconditioning on top of a kind of mechanical reconditioning, and require different skills, but then also kind of the appraisal of things. Before, if we looked at what's the value of a used car, ultimately, you look at things like mileage, condition, and all these kind of things. Now it's also, what software has been enabled, what's the latest software it has, what features does it have. So it's really difficult actually to turn that into how do you value a vehicle. So I think all of those things are relatively new and are also changing on a really rapid basis. Cybersecurity is a huge topic, obviously, now with everything that's going on in the automotive industry. How do you protect yourself against that ultimately as well? So I think, there's a number of things we are already doing, but then also new capabilities we are developing. And I think the biggest thing for everyone is always the thing around data protection and data privacy between consumers. I think we're in really good state there, but then everything around the element around, how do you transfer software between different users, especially if there's rapid ownership changes potentially as well, and software comes in and out quite quickly. I think that's the area where the whole industry, frankly, still needs to skill up.
I think there's a really interesting customer point there, not just on the used vehicle. You're absolutely right. The data privacy, making sure you've got a clean vehicle, making sure the used car industry understands what state that vehicle is in, what software it's got on it, what features, etc. That's a really relevant point. But it's an equally relevant point for new vehicles. Now, I was at Everything Electric last weekend showing our Changan Deepal S07 to customers, and they loved it. What they really loved was the simplicity of it, because we believe, here's a car, it's the best car we can make, it's got all of the features on it, and it's one price. And we're not going to have very complicated grade structures and option packs. And I was talking to some customers of German premium cars who had driven their car out of the showroom and were very excited about it, and then found out that most of the features they tried on the test drive weren't available on their car until they paid a £20 a month subscription.
Let's see.
And that's a real problem for our industry. It's a real problem for salespeople because they have to understand that really, really effectively. It's a real problem because you've put stock into them, and maybe it's not actually really a software-defined vehicle, so maybe they have to sell the stock that they've got that doesn't have the right features. And it's a much bigger problem for customers and their customer satisfaction. So we think at Changan that by selling one car, one price, all of the technology on it, and if we add a feature, we'll add it for everybody. And we won't come back and say, that's actually now going to be £20 a month. Oh, you wanted brakes? Oh, yeah, no, those are extra. And I think that's a really, really critical thing. And then, as we move into the used car area, it's really important, exactly as you said, to make sure that we understand, our dealers understand how to wipe a vehicle. We've got all that. All of our customer data, all of our vehicle data is stored on Amazon Web Services in Europe, only stays in Europe. We understand, data is a concern for people in buying a Chinese car. We've made very clear commitments on GDPR and all of those things, and very clear industry information on how to wipe all of that information from a vehicle, but also how to, there's very clear version control to make sure everybody can see what state that vehicle is in when they're selling it or buying it as a used car.
You've touched on a really important point there. I think the changing landscape, certainly in the retail space as well. Is there anything in particular that the retailer network is having to do to try and adopt to these SDVs, whether you're thinking of how to sell the vehicles? You guys just have one SKU, it's your car, it comes with all the features. You've got other OEMs who, like you say, charge monthly for some of their options. How is the SDV landscape changing the relationship between the retailer and the customer?
I think that's a really important point. And in previous lives, it's something I worked on, where you can't just leave this all up to the dealer. And typically that's what OEMs tend to do, is just, let the dealers figure it out. The dealer needs the perfect information. They need to know exactly what's on that vehicle, what's not on that vehicle, what are they selling, what might they have to explain to a customer about subscriptions and all of these things. We know, dealer salespeople are brilliant at what they do if you give them the right information, if you give them the right tools. But they're not, they want to sell a car. They don't want to then be selling all of your option packs and your accessory packs and your wall chargers and your finance and your gap protection and everything else. They want to move on to their next customer. And so, you've got to make it simple for the salespeople as well. And I've forgotten what the question was, so I'm going to wander off, but feel free to repeat it at some point. But no, it's very much changing the industry in terms of you've got to, and if you're going to update the vehicle after you've sold it, you have to make really, really sure that you've properly tested that software. It's going to work, because as soon as it doesn't work, they're going to go back to the dealer. And if you didn't even tell the dealer you've changed the software because it's over the air, what's the dealer going to do? So the OEM has a huge responsibility to properly either take over the customer service, which is not something the dealers want, because the dealers want their relationship with their customer, or you've got to make sure that the dealers really understand what's happening and have the power to fix it and know what to do if it does go wrong, because otherwise they're just going to have to deal with all of your angry customers, and you haven't given the tools to work with that. We then get into the impact on after sales and all of these things. That's a different issue for dealer profitability, which is a really important one. But perhaps that's a different topic for today.
It's more up your street, that, Karoline, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I'm really glad actually you talked about after sales, because I think, the new car, there's a lot of change for the dealer in the new car space. But from an after sales point of view, there's a huge impact on that as well, right? Just in terms of the skills required ultimately as well. When we talk about after sales servicing, whether it's in the dealer space, whether it's the industry Cox operates in, it's not just about mechanicals anymore. You need to understand, the technicians need to understand how software ultimately works, right? What's the software dependencies? What are the data flows in a vehicle? How does it all link together? And it's not just about, which updates have been put on, but also if there's an issue, how do I fix it, right? And how do I maybe use remote diagnostics or predictive maintenance or things like that, to solve certain after sales issues or servicing, either before the customer ever even comes into my showroom, Or how do I then fix it once the vehicle is in? How do I calibrate all these different sensors? So it's a completely different set of skills from an after-sales perspective than would have been the case for a long period, right? So there's a huge upskilling required of the industry, but then also between the OEM and the dealers. And I think that has to be a really close working relationship, because a lot of the development sits obviously in OEM HQ, but then the actual like servicing and execution of that in front of the customer is with the dealership and the servicing network ultimately.
You almost answered the question I was going to ask,
Oh,
which was going to be, do you then think it's on the OEM, onus on the OEM to train those people, upskill those people to ensure that we have the right maintenance on the vehicles? And in terms of a kind of independent dealer perspective who don't work maybe directly with OEMs, who's responsible for that kind of, because we've got a shortage at the moment, right, of technicians working on SDVs, working on EVs even, and how do we upskill those people to a point where, you know, we could go into almost any garage and expect a technician who can fix my engine, or maybe can also fix that battery.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, it's an industry problem, right? And not just the industry. You can even take it further and say, you know, when we think about where technicians are trained, you know, at the colleges and stuff, I mean, all of that needs adapting to the technician of the future ultimately, right? From hardware technician to almost like a systems engineer kind of thing that has a lot of data and software knowledge included in terms of understanding, you know, different software languages in the vehicles, how it all links together, understanding centralized computing systems. So it's very different skill set, but I can also make it more attractive ultimately, right? In terms of a new generation coming in terms of technician, because there's a bigger software focus, these are transferable skills to some extent as well. It's necessarily in the future just sitting in a garage. You know, a lot of it can also be done through remote diagnostics. So it's a completely different skill set ultimately. And I think kind of upskilling and changing the way the industry works is an industry thing, but it also needs a lot of inputs from manufacturers who are leading kind of the R&D in that space as well.
It's a really interesting point that you actually make about, I'd not thought of it like that, in that it's a completely different skill set. It's not just a mechanic. You could be doing computer science or maths at university, and you could still have that application to do those over-the-air updates, or in terms of a maintenance perspective, you need that skill set, not just the mechanical skill set.
Exactly.
And you could just do it from a computer, can't you? You know, it's just a different way of working, isn't it?
Yeah.
Completely different.
Well, I think from the OEM side, that's something, frankly, that the Chinese companies have understood, and that is why our speed to market is so much faster. The speed of development of a vehicle, because you've got a platform which is built around software, and then you can add different body styles onto it. We've got hundreds of thousands of engineers that can do all of that testing in very quick time. But actually, we've already employed the software engineers, and we work with the software companies, as opposed to a legacy OEM who is, you know, their whole workforce is built around powertrain engineers and chassis engineers, and that's a real advantage, and that's one of the reasons the Chinese OEMs are moving so fast into the market, is because we've already skilled up with those software engineers. We need to make sure that the dealer network can do the same, although you know, an awful lot of the dealer network side is largely plugging in a diagnostics tool and letting the diagnostics tool do the work for them. But ultimately, you know, to come back to your point, it's definitely our responsibility as an OEM to make sure that the dealer network is fully trained, has all of the right equipment, has the right capability to do it, and we need to support them in making profit in a different world as well, because the workshop is changing, the work that comes into the workshop is changing, and that's been a big driver for dealer profitability for a long time, and you know, they won't be able to rely on it in the same way in the future. So we need to work with our dealer partners to make sure that they have a proper business case as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. I think one of the things, you know, it's clear that there's a lot of focus around EVs and stuff around software-defined vehicles. It's the trajectory that we're all on sort of within the next sort of 10 to 15 years or so. Be interested to hear from you guys to understand, you know, if there is a small amount of difference or a huge amount of difference between, you know, your standard fully EV vehicle and some of the newer hybrids technologies and stuff that's being introduced to the market as well.
In terms of the software that's in it? Yeah. So we've seen a lot of software packaged in with electrified vehicles, right? And that comes through multiple ways. You know, Nic talked about, you know, a lot of Chinese OEMs, you know, almost leapfrogged straight to electrification, but then also kind of brought with that huge technology impact that's really attractive to the consumer. So we definitely see that EVs are leading the way when it comes to kind of the software, the user experience, and in the SDV space as well. And I think also it helps with some of the adoptions. When we think about what's holding people back today from electrification, it's uncertainties around resale value, battery life, battery degradation, range anxiety, all these kind of things, right? In terms of if you have software and sensors, it can help customers plan routes ultimately to the best charging station. It can charge automatically overnight. It can calibrate the battery in a way that is the least degrading. It can give battery health scores. We see a lot of movements in that space as well from a lot of the OEMs to just give customers more certainty and more confidence and more transparency ultimately in the state of the battery. So we see a lot of software advances in the electrification space for multiple reasons, because of some of the new OEMs, but then also because it's also a way to make EVs more attractive and more to create a pull from customers as well who are looking for these kind of advanced connectivity features.
It's almost like tech in the car and tech always out the car, isn't it? With
exactly.
EVs, it's on your phone and you can find out that it's charged fully, and it's just making the life easier, as you were saying, Nic, for the customer. How does Changan kind of implement that in their EV SDV strategy?
Yeah, so for us, the difference between EV and a hybrid is relatively limited in terms of, we will sell our Changan Deepel SO7, our SO5. They will have both hybrid and full EV options in the same body style. And the customer experience in terms of, what I was talking about earlier, the screens, the software, the integrated, the toolbars, etc., that's all identical. Obviously below the hood, I don't know, below the floor plan these days, the battery management system we can control in terms of if we need to update the battery management unit, for example, you can do that with an over-the-air update. And the customer, as you said, can absolutely control their charging and all of those things, their remote control, air conditioning, etc., with their app. And I do schedule my charging sitting in bed at night, and I am that boring. But with a hybrid, obviously you've got a petrol engine in there as well. We can still do over-the-air updates and manage systems to a degree, but obviously there are much more mechanical things in that engine as well that you can't control remotely. So there's that. But our approach is very much, use as much of the software-defined things as we possibly can to continually enhance the vehicles, to monitor the vehicles, that predictive maintenance as we were talking about. Obviously with the full consent of the customer, making sure that they know what's happening, what we're doing. If we're going to do anything, we need their permission to do it. That's clear. And giving the customer the access to all of the features within the vehicle so that they can manage it themselves remotely as well.
I think when we talk about tech within EVs, we've got, our last episode was on EVs, and we know that there's customer concerns around, adoption. We're seeing rates soaring, but you still speak to people and they're a bit, they've got all these myths in their head and they're not quite sure what they're getting when they get an EV. How does the tech and these apps and everything kind of ease those concerns?
Absolutely. Ultimately, transparency, I think, creates trust over time. So the more transparent we can be with customers, or the car can be, right, in terms of basically some of the OEMs adapting now battery health scores.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the battery management system. There's so many data points and information points you can get just from the battery management system that tells you about what is the health of the battery. It can advise a customer how to charge it to keep the degradation to a minimum. It can help also over time give more accurate ranges, because I think that's what obviously some customers feel as well. They see a certain range advertised and then they drive it and it's cold and suddenly it's only a quarter of the range is gone. With more advanced sensors, with the data, especially in SDV, that becomes more accurate to the customers as well. It can plan the routes already today to include the best charging facilities. It looks already today which one of these chargers are busy or maybe not working. So there's an interplay connected as well with the wider industry. So I think all of these things ultimately help to make the switch to EVs a lot easier and provide consumers the confidence in the technology and the usage and ultimately the battery health.
Yeah, I think anything which makes things more simple to understand for the customer, more transparent for the customer is always good. I've been advocating for selling EVs and selling EVs for more than 10 years. I'm a huge fan of them. I'm very passionate about them. Give me a chance and I'll go off for hours. But it's clear that many people, as you said, still quite rightly, quite reasonably, don't understand exactly what they are, exactly what they do, and what living with one is like. And for me, it's just a fundamentally better experience, because every morning I wake up with a fully charged car. I can drive 300 miles nonstop if I really need to. It's not recommended, but I have done it a couple of times, and it's quite draining. Or I can, yesterday I drove from north of London to Manchester and back with no problems whatsoever. And you make a quick charging stop when you're there, and all of these things are totally possible. And it's a much more pleasant drive. It's smoother, it's faster, it's more economical. It's just much more relaxing, and I've got all of the latest technology in the car, albeit, as I said, we provide that in a hybrid. So it's just a much better experience in an EV. But we have to break down those barriers. That's our responsibility collectively as an industry, is to explain to people what that is. It's my parents' Christmas party is now my most and least favourite event of every year, because there's always a queue of like 70-year-old people come out to me. You're the electric car guy. Tell me about this and how does this work? And I basically just get pinned in the corner the whole party, and I have to. It's my job to evangelise for electric cars.
You need to get your soapbox.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here I am.
You came to the studio today, and the first thing I said was, "Did you bring your card?" I want to see inside. So
but, there are so many other things that I'd want to get into with electric cars. So many things they offer us the opportunity to do. More and more people are getting solar panels or renewable energy at their homes, and then they're spending £5,000 and putting a battery on the wall of the garage. You've got a battery 10 times that size sitting outside on your drive, and if you're fortunate enough to have off-street parking, etc., why have you've just spent all that money on that? Why not just plug the battery into the house? And then we can, we need flexibility in our energy generation now. We need storage. We need the energy grid needs flexibility, and they're paying huge amounts. They're putting all these big battery packs in. People are putting them on their houses. If we could connect all of the electric cars to the houses or to the grid, we could solve so many problems all in one go, and not only make my driving experience better, but help solve some of the bigger problems that we have as a world. And there's hours and hours I could go on about this and stuff. Is
that how you see the future of EVs going?
Absolutely, I do. It's been my passion project. Vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, and it's something we managed to do in Japan, was to actually because in Japan most people don't drive their cars during the day, and most of them have solar power, so they plug their solar power into their car. Then they come home in the evening and they power their house from their car. And you've got an 80 kilowatt hour battery in your car. You maybe need 3, 5, 10 kilowatt hours of energy to actually power your house for the evening. So it's a very small amount of what you do. And most of us drive, the average drive is something like 15 miles per day. You've got a 300-mile range on your car, you do 15 miles per day. There's a huge battery capacity that you could use for all sorts of things. And if we can, it's complex. It requires investment. It requires cooperation, which is the biggest point. It requires thought. But Octopus Energy and OVO have been great leaders in this, and they're bringing all of the car companies and the energy providers in the grid together. And there's so much we could do if we can connect the cars to the energy system properly. Then there's huge amounts.
I feel like we need you back on to properly dive into that topic.
Sorry,
to be honest,
I can waffle on about this for hours, but it is my passion project.
No,
but you actually touched on a good point. Whether it's collaboration is such a big part of when you just think about not electric vehicles, software-defined vehicles. It's the same thing, or that's the same thing, but it's so connected in terms of, if we just think of it in silos, the OEM, the remarketers, the dealers, actually it all needs to come together, and it needs to think bigger picture in terms of how do we recreate a comprehensive approach where things, come together, SDVs ultimately as well, and whether that's electric or not, but they will function best if they can speak to the infrastructure around them ultimately, right? So vehicle to everything, whether that's traffic lights or vehicle patterns or the house or whatever it is, right? In terms of how does the car interact with its surroundings to make it a better experience. Again, that's not something OEMs can solve by themselves. So it needs kind of in industry, but also beyond the industry approach to really get the full benefit of what it could be ultimately. And it's the same for electrification.
The world is definitely changing, isn't it?
Yeah, with the power of the microchip.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to come back to the original point on, technology is only good if it's good technology.
Yeah.
I was driving down the M1 last night, and the M1 was closed. And so we all looked at Google Maps or Apple Maps or Waze, and we all got diverted onto the same road. Now, that's a basic, simple technology. So we all just clogged up that road instead of instead of sitting on the M1. But to your point, cooperative technology, predictive technology says, right, okay, let's direct these people there and these people there, and these people can stay there, and then the traffic flow will be better for everybody.
Yeah.
That's clever technology. That's connected technology. We can do the same with energy. We can do the same with with connected cars, with SDVs, and you can connect them to the traffic light flows. You can connect them. I sit every morning in a very long traffic light queue when there's nothing going the other way. There's all sorts of very, very clever things we can do if we can connect.
Yep.
People have to be ready to share their data. They have to be ready to see some level of control. So therefore, you have to give them benefits of your journey will be better and quicker, or everybody's journey will be better and quicker if we do these things. But there's endless possibilities for what we could actually do if we choose to work together.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing that in practice. I'm looking forward to seeing that interconnected world around SDVs and EVs.
Software-defined life.
Software-defined life.
Well, we already have it.
Yes, very much so.
It has to be done in a positive way.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a comprehensively covered SDVs. Thank you so much for being on today.
No, thank you.
It's been brilliant to hear from both of you. And yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there.
Yeah. No, thank you guys for having us.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Joining us for this episode of Talk Auto.
We have an email in our show notes. If you would like to leave any feedback or would like to be a guest on the show, just get in touch.
And feel free to like and subscribe across our social channels.
And you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. So thank you very much and see you next month.